Spicer, also the former White House press secretary under Donald Trump, author of the bestseller, The Briefing. Good to have you, Sean.
Thanks for having me.
Do you think, and you know him well, that the president would risk another shutdown, whether it's to blame on him or not? That Republicans, everything we've heard, Sean, are saying, do not revisit this.
That's a great question. I think that they're looking for every other option, recognizing the impact that the shutdown had. But I don't think he'll rule anything out. I think there's pros and cons to everything. The cons of the shutdown were clearly felt through so many families and individuals that they realized that the impact that it was having on the economy. You saw it in that last Friday, flight traffic, which isn't just about people traveling, right? It's our economy that's at stake.
Apparently, that's what motivated him to reverse. Do you agree?
I get it. I mean, you realize, again, this isn't just about catching a flight here or there. It's literally our economy will start to come to a standstill if flight traffic, goes off the rails like it was. So I think they're going to look at national emergency options. They're going to look at reprogramming money. But I think the other thing is that, and you brought this up in your conversation with Mark Meadows, is that you're seeing not just the rank and file members, but Dick Durbin, Steny Hoyer, Benny Thompson, the chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee, the chairman of the House Agriculture Committee. A lot of these folks are coming and saying, look, the wall's not immoral, as Nancy Pelosi said. Right. It does serve a purpose, as Steny Hoyer said. And so the question is, if we can kind of get this outside of Trump and Pelosi, who have just decided to go back and forth with each other, and look at it more analytically by getting a bunch of these members together and saying, okay, can we agree on certain things that make common sense? And then it's a product of theirs versus a product of the back and forth between the president and the speaker. We might actually be able to get something done and avoid all of this. Because here's the interesting thing. Yeah. I think that what the debate proved, and this is sort of a really interesting thing, the American people clearly did not like the shutdown, but they did increasingly, at least some polls, show an increase in the desire for the border wall and border security. So you had them agreeing with the president's policy, but not necessarily the overall tactic of shutting down the government. And I think if we can take it back a step, which he and everyone has done now, you can focus on the policy without the bad tactic that people didn't like. So you get rid of the government shutdown, you focus on the policy instead, and you might actually get a solution.
Still, I mean, although the gap narrowed, to your point, most Americans did not really think a wall was necessary. But I am curious about what motivates the president when he hears press commentary on, let's say, he caved or he blinked. You heard it all. Does that actually get him so annoyed? You work with him that he goes the other way. He has a history in the past of, if his base is upset, going to that base again and doing something they might like.
Well, again, I think, but he also is a guy that recognizes what doesn't work, and I think, again, I think what he's realizing now is kind of what I just said, which is that, all right, they might not have liked the shutdown, but I think I can, if I talk about this in terms of humanitarian aid, if I talk about it in terms of human security and a lot of and drugs coming over our border, all of those areas where there is widespread agreement, and focus on the Democrats that want to work with us, we might actually be able to find a solution. So I get it, but I don't think he's going to go back to that corner. He may do something else, declare an emergency, repurpose funds. I think he also, in this case, is playing the long game, which is to understand that if I as president can fulfill this one more promise that I have a pretty good track record of delivering on, I will be rewarded. So I think his team has said to him, look, you can keep getting what you want and fulfilling these promises, but it may not be the quick game that we anticipated through this funding process.
I was not aware, Sean, there were so many people writing books on the administration. This latest guy, Cliff Sims, whose team of Vipers is getting a lot of press ahead of Chris Christie's book due out the end of the week that takes a look behind the scenes at Jared Kushner, not so favorably and all. What is it that engenders this type of stuff?
I think that's a great question, Neil. I don't have an answer for you because, as you know, you and I have discussed the book that I read. I don't think I took anyone really to task in that book. It was a book about my experiences and how I kind of grew up and made it where I was. I think this idea of settling scores and taking advantage of a position of privilege and honor is just unbecoming.
But I'm sure your publishers, I raised with you when your book came out, and you're right, you were harder on yourself than anyone else, which, by the way, I told you never to do. Don't be hard on yourself. But no, having said that I got a sense that you didn't want to get in the gutter or play off that experience to go after the president. But this Cliff Sims, he takes everybody to task, including himself, by
Right.
the way. But he also says that Kellyanne Conway was the source of a lot of leaks.
But
And I'm
see,
wondering,
here's the thing.
did you know from your experience of something like that, or who was leaking, and would she be among them?
If I knew who was leaking, my life would have been a lot easier. I don't, and I mean, there's always suspicions as to who was in this. You only had X number of people in this room, and you have a story out. So was it
Right.
someone in the room, or did they tell somebody? But I think that going back to what you kind of raised a second ago, when you sit around, if you come up with an idea of the book, you sit around with a bunch of publishers, and they try to push you to see how far you'll go and how sensational you'll be. I made a decision that wasn't what I was about, and that's what I wanted to do. I think in this particular case, you've got somebody who is given this sort of mid-level position of trust and has abused it. And I think the problem that I look at that is that it's not just about him and some of the score settling and attempts to try to screw somebody over, but it really poisons the well for everybody else coming forward. Because now you don't know when you're sitting in a room, is that person just taking notes or writing something down because they want to be helpful or further the goal of the meeting or the mission or the
Did you ever
agenda?
wonder about that at the time? And the only reason I ask is because Chris Christie in his book is recounting conversations and obvious copious note-taking that zeroes in at Jared Kushner. And a lot of amateurs, he said, surrounded the president and heard his agenda. He was largely devoid of blaming any of that on the president, but that he put his trust in all the wrong people, including his son-in-law.
Well, look, here's the interesting thing, and I have a lot of respect for what Governor Christie did in terms of serving not just his state, but in helping the campaign during the campaign and then during the transition. But Governor Christie knows well as well that there weren't that many people rushing up to Trump Tower to help us out. A lot of the establishment Republicans sat on the side. A lot of the veteran operatives weren't part of it. So the president rewarded a lot of people who were there for him, and I respect that quality in him. That being said, I don't necessarily think all of those people should have had the jobs that they had. So Governor Christie's got a point. That there were a lot of individuals, and we've talked about some of them in the past, who I think out of a sense of loyalty, the president wanted to take care of them because they were there when nobody else was. But I'm not really sure that they all deserve, West Wing jobs or high-ranking positions in areas that they had no qualifications for. And so you've got to balance that. It's making sure that you reward the people who were loyal to you, who were there and served you when no one else would, but also making sure that you're putting them in the right positions. And so I think there's a little bit of truth to what Governor Christie's saying. Not in specific people, but remember, when you look at, and this president wasn't a guy who came from government, so he didn't have a whole host of people who had served or advised him in the past, like most of our other presidents on both sides of the aisle have done. So the question to me more is like, what do you do with it? And the idea that this individual is out there now trashing everybody that he worked with, everybody that brought him into these meetings, and even allowed him to stay in ones that he wasn't invited to, really speaks to his character. And makes you wonder who can ever trust you again if you're sitting in a room and you don't know if that individual is taking notes, writing something down, videotaping you. It doesn't bode well for that individual's future.
Is there something about the president that encourages this behavior?
No, not at all. In fact, the reports that I have is that he's very unhappy and very outraged. I don't think that he appreciates this behavior one bit.
Yeah.
At least nothing that I've ever seen. In fact, he always was,
But maybe to
upset
get
at
respect
leaks
and
coming out.
loyalty, you have to show respect and loyalty. I just wonder.
Yeah. It's a good point.
Okay. Sean, always good talking to you, my friend. America First Action Senior
Thank you.
Advisor and Spokesman, best-selling author, served the president as his spokesman and advisor. We'll have more after this.
A better chance with China as new negotiations approach. What will it take